Welcome back to the Counterfeit Emotions podcast. I'm Curtis Morley, and I'm an emotionologist. Thanks for joining me on this journey to explore your emotions and find the most authentic emotion, which is peace. Today, I'm super excited because I have a dear friend and an amazing man, a therapist, a leader of retreats, and a leader of men with me in the studio who has been an instrumental part of my life and the transformation that I was able to make. Today, we've got Austin Ellis.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And dive deep, Curtis. Go wherever you want to go.
This is going to be so good.
Let's get into,
I've been so looking forward to this conversation because of the impact that you had on my life, because of the dramatic impact. Some of the greatest changes that I was able to make happened in the wilderness, in a cave,
where it happens.
in a, carrying a tree up a mountain.
That's how it happens, right?
They happened with you. And for that, I'm so grateful. I am so grateful that you gave me a different way to look at the world. And so, we're starting off with the watery eyes.
So let's get some emotions going.
This is already great.
I'm glad that you came and that it was impactful.
Yeah. So that everybody knows what we're talking about, you do an event called Rise.
Right.
And it's a men's retreat where it's very experiential. It's like crazy hands-on, but it's also, in a way, it's mind-bending. Mind-bending is probably the wrong word. It's enlightening. It's transcendent, just to be able to look at things in a different way and be able to break out of the traps that we find ourselves in.
Right.
And in particular, the one that I'd love to talk about today talks about masks. And so give us a little more history, a little more background of Rise, like how it started, what the purpose is, and kind of a little about the experience.
Sure. Yeah. And Rise was born. So I was a clinical director of a therapy clinic, and we did primarily helping couples where there was sexual addiction, sexual betrayal. And I was primarily the couples therapist, like one of the couples therapists. And we had, groups of people healing and overcoming behaviors. And at that time, we were leaders in the country, and we were doing a lot of really cool things. And I got put in a place, my position became I needed to train all these therapists. And so that clinic grew to like 35 clinics throughout the country. I'd come from another place that had 50 throughout the country. And my primary role was to train other therapists. And I was like, we're doing really good work, but it's too slow. And I said, we're doing some of the best couples work. We're doing some of the best healing, the roots of addiction. And I have a different feeling about addiction now than I did then, but maybe we talk about that some and trauma. Sure. But I saw just this, a friend of mine sent me a video of a guy doing these retreats. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I never really, thought much about that. And I was like, maybe there's a way that we can help people in a more rapid fashion. And the mindset was, can we help someone in 4 days better than we can help them in a year? And so the event, I was like, we're going to put together like a 50-hour event, and we're going to see if we can get more done in these, 50 hours than we can in a whole year. And what was interesting about that first one was it was all clients that I'd been seeing for a while. So I knew them, they knew me, same Austin. They came to what was called Rise Week at the time. And all of them were like, I don't know what just happened, but that was more impactful than all the other things we've ever done. And I was like, same therapist leading this. It's a totally different experience when it's immersive and you can just go into it. And I started to get this feedback from wives, like, who is this guy that, right? We just did one a few weeks ago, similar situation. The wives are like, I haven't seen this guy in a long time. And I met with someone last night, actually. It's been 2 weeks since the event. And I sat down with him and his wife, and she's like, I don't know that I've ever met this version of my husband. She's like, it's been magic. And that's, I believe, due to the immersion. Like, our goal is to help a man find who he really is, and not on a cognitive level, like a visceral, experiential level. And so that first one was magical. And you had this man that maybe felt in the dumps, buried in shame,
Yeah.
lost in feeling, worthless or whatever. And like all of a sudden he was like, I know who I really am. And he could feel it. And so from there I was like, man, let's keep going. And I realized the experiential component, like so much of our learning is cognitive. And I read a book, it might be called Boys Adrift, something like that. And the author points out, he says there's two types of learning. I haven't fact checked this, right? But he said in all other languages, there's two words for knowledge. He said in the English language, we have knowledge. He says, but there's informational knowledge. And he's like, there's experiential knowledge. Right? So my analogy is like, I love to snowboard. It's like I can read about snowboarding. I can watch a bunch of videos. Then I get on the mountain. I don't know how to snowboard, right? Doesn't matter how much information I have.
Yeah.
And so Rise Week is built on that. Like men need experiential knowledge gain. And so rather than just giving a bunch of information, we help them through experiencing. So if we talk about stepping into your strength, like we do experiences where it requires them to step in their strength. And then they feel like, oh, I'm pretty powerful. And then we teach them how to tap into that in regular life. It's like you tapped into it. It's in you. Let's just help you know how to do it day to day instead of like sitting on the couch playing video games, trying to feel powerful, killing imaginary guys or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that was that. I love that you hit on that, the experiential. There's a project in, I believe it's Norway, where it's called The Shed. Where they do therapy, specifically men's health therapy, but they don't do it like, come sit down on my soft couch and here's a box of Kleenex and let's talk about all your emotions. They do it as, it's called The Shed, and they do it as a work project. So they say women connect face to face, men connect side to side. And so it's a tool shed. It's a work shed. Like you can do woodworking and other things, and you build things, and at the same time you talk and you just let it flow, and it's just natural. And I think that specifically for men, I think that really taps into that let's do something together, experience something together, and then I can start to be a little more vulnerable.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because that vulnerable piece, I think of it this way, like men want to feel strong. They want to feel, tough. And so we stuff our emotions thinking that that's being strong. And I often use this analogy, like what's more courageous, to walk into a battle with all your armor on or to walk with your armor off, right? And it's like, oh, that's courageous to come in with your armor off. And I said, what would that require? I'd have to know what I was capable of to come to battle without my armor. And so what happens with men is we come into our relationships and we have all this self-protective armor on and we're like, oh, I'm safe. And it's like, you're not safe. Your emotions are all inside. Like, take that armor off, and especially within your marriage, right? And with your kids, like, be who you are. That's where you're operating from courage, is to say, hey, I'm hurting or I'm scared. Like a lot of men say that feels so weak. The emotions feel weak. Sharing them is actually super powerful. It means you have courage to say, I got a broken leg. Like, I've got to quit climbing this mountain with my guts hanging out. Like, let's heal that stuff. And the cool thing is it can heal pretty rapidly.
Yeah. And that was one thing that I experienced personally. Like, I had some instantaneous healing. Like it was so crazy to me because before this, I'd heard about, oh yeah, you can change your brain pretty quick. But then the prevailing thought was no, you can't.
Right.
If you went through 10 years of trauma, it's going to take 10 years of therapy or maybe 20, maybe 30 to get you out of that. But I personally experienced some instantaneous changes to my brain, to my heart, to my emotions, that it was almost indescribable. Right. The swiftness in which it changed. Right. And before I share my version of what happened with you, talk to me about why is
Sure.
that? Why
Yeah.
is it possible
Mhm.
that we can have instantaneous change to our emotions, to our thoughts, to our trauma?
Right.
How can we get out of trauma so quickly?
Right.
And why was that? Why was the opposite so prevailing
Mhm.
in the world
Right.
of psychology?
Yeah, well, let me start with that part. Like, for so many people, they do all sorts of work. There's a book called Letting Go by David
Mm,
Hawkins.
yeah, one of my favorites.
Yeah, and in the first chapter, he spends like, I don't know, 6 minutes, like one by one listing like all these things people do to heal, all these, the varieties of therapy, everything, right? And he says at the end, he's like, look at all the things we're willing to do. He's like, what if it's not out there? What if it's super simple and it's inside, right? And so the way that things can heal rapidly is if you think of, I can be in a fine mood today and something external can happen and instantly my mood can shift, right?
Mhm.
This is the nature of what we call a trigger is, oh, now something inside of me, anger, just got triggered up and it shifted in an instant. And I didn't consciously choose that. It happened to me. And so if we can go from a positive to a negative instantaneously, I had a mentor, he spent his doctoral, thesis time on if it can go from positive to negative instantaneously through a trauma or even just a trigger. He's like, why does it take 20 years to heal that? He's like, why can't we just flip it back instantaneously?
Yeah.
And so some of the things I learned from him, that's what Rise is built on, is this principle. There's another principle. When I trained as a couples therapist, Sue Johnson, she says what helps couples heal in a therapeutic context is the therapist is facilitating a new interaction or a new experience between them around old things. She calls it a corrective emotional experience.
Mm.
And so you worked at Franklin Covey, right?
Mhm.
Stephen Covey, he shares a story of like paradigm shifting. I think he shares a story where he's on I think it's like a train in Europe or something, and a man gets on, and the man's kids are being rambunctious, and everybody's annoyed, and the guy's aloof.
Screaming and yelling and
Right.
yeah.
And the dude's just aloof, and like increasingly all the passengers are being annoyed. And so Stephen goes over and, I guess sits by the man, and he's like, excuse me, sir, like, what are you doing? Right? Like, you can't see what's happening. And the man kind of, I guess, looks up from a daze, and he's like, oh, he's like, sorry, we came from a hospital where my wife and their mother just died. And right, like instant shift for Stephen, a perspective shift, this paradigm shift changes everything in an instant. What felt so real in his body all of a sudden was no longer real. It was the exact opposite. And where anger and frustration, instant compassion and love came. And so that's what we try to do. I mean, that's what we do at Rise. It works every time because it's built on how the brain works. And so if you have an intense, let's call it traumatic experience, it locks it in like viscerally, right, into our body, into our minds, our subconscious. And so what we do is we create highly empowering experiences that people stay in for several days or whatever. It's again and again and again, I'm getting into this visceral feeling state with a new belief system of, my favorite one to see is when a guy goes from like believing he's an addict to going like, I'm a son of God, I'm a king, like, and like they're not just saying it because they've been taught that their shame is whatever. It's like, I don't see myself that way anymore, and I can't see myself that way anymore. That's when we know change has happened, right?
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Not only I don't see myself that way,
I can't
see myself
Right.
that way. I
Right.
can't see myself as an addict
Right.
because that's not my true nature.
Right.
That's not who I am.
Right. That's something, right? I have my past with pornography and truly being out of control. And I remember for like early in my therapy career, I was going to therapy and I was reiterating, I'm an addict, I'm an addict, I'm an addict. So many guys, right? You know this.
That's the SA program. That's like the very first thing you do in every meeting is you stand up and you announce your shame.
Right. And the challenge there is like, that becomes your identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if your identity is addict, if your identity of your spouse is addict or broken or narcissist or whatever, you limit the way you can see them. That's the only way I can see you now. Doesn't matter how much good you do, right? And so part of my healing journey was shedding that identity and stepping into like, let's say my brain was addicted, and let's say I did all sorts of things, which I did. I can repent, I can say sorry, and I can change. And when you start to understand the backstory of how people start to use unhealthy behaviors to cope and numb, you realize like this isn't who they really are. This is what they did to survive.
Yeah.
To right. They just wanted to escape some pain or, some shame, and then it doubles, as we know, right?
Yeah.
And so the experiences at Rise Week, there's two really important factors that I operate from. And the first one was just a gift from God that was given to me 4 days before the first one. I had spent a lot of time like logistics and planning out and just thinking through like experiences and how to guide them. But I hadn't actually like mapped out the event. And so I sat down, I was like, okay, it's time to like, what's going to happen here exactly? And the Lord, I was in meditation and prayer, and the Lord said, well, before he said this, he showed me the guys that were coming, and I had just a paradigm shift about them. I knew them, and they were coming in with their, addiction behaviors, and each one of them was like the Lord helped me see them as who they really are. And the language I used was like a king. And so I saw these guys, and I was like, this is who they really are. This is who they can become, kind of thing. And the Lord was like, all you do here is you treat them that way. They've been treating themselves like this broken, and it was like, you just treat them like a king. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to treat them like kings. And over the course of time, I'd see each one like they'd own it. And they're like, oh, I know who I am, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of that initial shift for me, is to try to get them there. So this last one we did, we were there in about 4 hours at a group of kings standing in front of me. And one of the guys in particular, I went outside with him, and he's like, I need to make some big changes. And he told me the nature of the things. And he's like, I'm capable of this. Like, he went from defeated and like feeling broken to like capable. And he's since gone home and disclosed some things nobody wants to disclose. And what was cool is I had an experience with his wife, about a 4-hour experience a few days later after he told her these things. And I guided, she asked, she's like, I don't know what he went through, but he's a different person, and he sees me and treats me totally different. And she's like, can I have some of that? And so I guided her through a similar process where she was able to see who he really is, and not what the fear and the shame and all that was telling her.
Yeah.
The second piece, well, any thoughts there? I'll go into the second piece if you want. But
no, let's hit the second piece and then jump into some of the experiences.
So, the second piece that's really important at Rise is I can spend a whole bunch of time talking principles. I've learned over time it will be the felt sense more than the words that are really important. And so I'm really trying to work with the Lord on what experience does this man need to feel. And so sometimes I do some stuff that I'm like, am I about to do that? And I've decided I just go. Like, if I feel like promptings from the Lord that this is going to affect a man, I'm going to do it. And so this last one I'll share, we were working on a really important concept, and I could tell a few of the guys were stuck. And some of my, my team members were trying to help, and I was like, this feels a little stuck. And so I just, I kind of go upwards. I'm like, what do we do? I want to help this shift happen. And I find myself, and you experience this, I find myself, and I don't do the same thing every time. Like, Rise is an experience. Like, you're stepping in, that you're stepping in, you don't have an agenda, and I don't have like a play-by-play anymore. I know where I want to help people get, but I started this lion meditation.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So powerful.
And this one was a little different than I think the one you experienced, but I found myself having these guys kneel on the ground and brought this lion up to them. And one of the guys in particular, like, he expresses as like, I don't know how to live in my masculine strength. I live in like more of this feminine energy. And I was like, I need to wake up this freaking lion in this guy, right? And so I guide this lion coming to them, and the guys are kneeling, and I have them get on and like imagine that this lion's like right in front of them. And I found myself saying, and this lion reaches out to you, and he grabs your neck with his paw, and you instantly feel his power, and your voice unlocks. And this happens, and this guy just starts crying. And he's like, afterwards, he's like, I know who I am. He's like, I'm a lion. And he goes,
it just roars.
and he was like unstoppable in that moment. We could have talked about the power of a lion. We could have, like logically worked through it, but that's not how our subconscious mind works. We don't consciously choose fear and shame. We experience it. So we need to like work in that space to shift the subconscious. And that's what these experiences do. It's like that paradigm shift, right? And then teaching men to tap back into it, right? And so we do things like this, where that becomes a positive trigger. I call it an anchor, where when you do this,
tap on the chest.
Yep. The mind goes, oh, this is a signal that we feel powerful. And so even that for me, like I feel adrenaline pour through my body, just the same as if I had some type of, negative trigger that instantaneously could shift my physiologically or emotionally. We just do that on the flip side with the positive, which is cool.
Yeah. And if we can dive into that,
Sure.
into the lion. So this was an incredibly powerful experience for me. And currently in my office, I have a massive painting from one of the guy's wives,
Right.
Kelly Gubler,
Mm-hmm.
who it's this gorgeous, like powerful, fierce lion.
Mm-hmm.
And we were up on a mountain. We were walking along this trail, and you had to stop. And ahead of the trail, probably 100 yards, there was this big pine tree where you couldn't see where the trail followed.
Mm-hmm.
So it curved around this great big pine tree and out of view. And you had us imagine this lion come around the corner, and it wasn't a regular lion.
Mm-hmm.
This was like Aslan. This was like this
Right.
massive, gigantic, horse-sized lion with this beautiful flowing mane. And the way you described it was, at least for us, was that it was this ferocious, powerful lion that could have instilled fear.
Right.
Could have, been like, oh boy, well, and you had the lion walk up to us, and what we didn't see as the lion was coming was there was a little boy to the side, and and you shared with us that it's no longer time to be afraid of the lion, that it's time to be the lion.
Right.
And that little boy that was walking by holding the mane of the lion was us. And the lion was trying to protect that little boy. Mm-hmm. The lion was trying to, his purpose was fortitude, protection, to be able to say, oh, I'm going to protect this little boy at all costs.
Right.
And when the lion became me, when it changed from this ferocious thing that could have attacked me, and for most of my life, that's how it felt.
Right.
Like inside was this battle of this ferocious lion and then me.
Right.
And it wasn't until those two merged, it wasn't until the lion and I became one, that I could see that little boy.
Right.
That little boy who'd gone through so much pain. Mm-hmm. That little boy that had these things that happened in his life that he didn't understand.
Right. Right.
And later, one of the last activities we did, you brought that boy back, and you brought every version of that boy back. Mm-hmm. Every version of that, the Curtis of yesterday that I didn't want to accept as part of me, that I wanted to fracture and exile from my soul, to say, nope, you don't get to be a part of me. Mm-hmm. You don't get to be, who I show the world. Mm-hmm. But you had us see that Curtis, and the Curtis of yesterday that I saw was the Curtis in college. Mm-hmm. And you had me go to that Curtis. Mm-hmm. and look him in the eyes, and you said, see him in love, see him in grace, have compassion for him, see him as someone that got you to today.
Right.
Because without him, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
In all of his faults, in all of his deficiencies, he still got you to today.
Right.
And now it's time to lay him down.
Right.
And in my mind, I saw myself embracing the Curtis of yesterday. And I gave him a kiss on the cheek. And I said, thank you.
Yeah.
I've got it from here. And I laid him down and I let him rest. And he'd been struggling for so many years.
Right.
He'd been struggling and fighting and so tired.
Right.
For so many years. And when I laid him down and I took my power, I became the lion and said, I've got it from here. I loved the Curtis of yesterday. Whereas before, I did not like that guy.
Shame that guy. Right.
I did not like that guy at all.
Right.
I didn't want him to be part of me with all of his mistakes and his fallacies and his sins and everything that came with that. I didn't want him part of me.
Right.
But when I could finally see him in his purity, in his innocence, in the fact that he was doing the best he could with the tools he had, that's when I could not only accept him back in, but I could love him.
Right. And that emotional shift, right? It's a complete, like, I see it totally different and I'm experiencing it. And now I internalize that. And now I can operate from a new, let's call it higher version of myself, really more connected to our spirit. And that's, I think, what has been so powerful for me in my own journey. Is these really powerful, just, I'd call them shifts with the Lord. Most of what I do at Rise came through what I'll call revelation from God. There's experiences I've had with the lion in my own meditative space that shifted things in me. And then I feel the Lord say, now you go and help others with the same. And so, the work that I do, whether it's in a an event context or with a couple or whatever, it's really about getting people to see and feel who they really are and their partner, and having this new way to see people and themselves. And so if we know, like, hey, I'm going to experience negative, emotions that I don't want to feel, but I'm not afraid of them, I can look at them, I can see what's a counterfeit, right? And I can shift into a different state of being, not a stuffing it down, not a numbing, which we're so accustomed to, but really acknowledging, like, I'm feeling this feeling. Is it helping me be who I want to be? And it becomes more of a conscious effort where it's like, I'm choosing who to be instead of I'm reacting based on the emotional state I'm in. And so when we can choose power, confidence, peace, when nothing around us should suggest that, now we're operating from who we really are instead of letting the external, change us. And so the experience you had at Rise and the experiences I have at Rise, like, every time I'm in a different space than the men coming, but I have these shifts where it increases my knowledge of how quickly healing can happen. Like, I see it all the time. Long-standing things that people have done years and years of therapy truly end rapidly. It doesn't mean you go home and you never have to, like, be conscious again of, like, hey, I can be whole, I can be happy. Like, I believe there's things around us that attempt to bring us back down. But when we wake up each day and we're like, hey, I know who I am, and come what may, I know who I am, that's a different way of living, right? Yeah. And a lot of people we meet have these masks on, right?
Yeah, the masks from the past.
Right, the masks from the past. want me to go into that a little bit? That mask concept?
Yeah,
You want to set that up a little bit?
Actually, so I would love to take everything you just said and put it into the cave, because this was one of those experiences that like you said, it's a choice. And the key things I'd like to hit on specifically are the choice. I get to choose my emotions. I get to choose what I'm going to feel and how I'm going to act every day. But then also that transformation piece of how quickly this can happen. And so, do you want to set up the cave, or do you want me to set up the cave?
Why don't you set it up? And there's different versions of the cave, right?
Yeah, you've been through so many. I better tell my version. So we went down to the lava tubes in St. George, Utah, which they're these channels, these caves of lava that run, some of them pretty far back. And we went to the largest one, and you gave everybody, there was a box of headlamps that you gave everybody, put on a headlamp, and you said, all right, give me 3 to 5 minutes and then come find me. And that was the total instruction. It was just like, okay, come find me. And we're like, okay. So we wait about 5 minutes and everybody puts on their headlamps, and we start walking back into this cave. And where we found you was at the very end of the cave, and you were on this rock outcropping above us. And we all kind of gathered around, and you said, all right, turn off your lights. And everybody turned off the lights, and it was pitch black. I couldn't see like 2 inches in front of me. And then you said, turn them back on. And when we turned it back on and everybody was pointing their lights up at you, you were wearing this mask. So the masks of the past, you're wearing this mask, and it was demonic. Like it's a scary looking mask. And in full disclosure, at that point I thought, oh crap, what cult am I in?
What am I doing here?
How do I get out of here? Like instantly, I'm like, oh boy, what's going on? And then you started having this conversation with yourself. And as you did, I noticed on the mask words like shame, broken,
addict,
and all of these words, loser. Yes. I remember seeing these words on the mask. And you had this conversation with yourself where you would be wearing the mask and the lights would be on. We'd turn off the lights. When we lit the cave again, you'd be on the opposite side without the mask. And the conversation was this, the demon, the mask that you were wearing was completely belittling the Austin on the other side, saying, who do you think you are? Why do you think you can lead these men? You're just an imposter.
You're worthless.
You're worthless. You're no better than them. You have the same problems you have. And just over and over again, belittling. And then you'd switch and it'd be like, no, I know I can help these men. I know I can because I have. I've seen these changes. And then you'd flip back. And I wanted to crawl out of my skin, probably because the mask was so scary to start. But then after that, the reason that I wanted to crawl out of my skin was because I was having those exact same conversations in my mind. And I did not want to acknowledge it. I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to say, this is exactly the dialogue that's happening in my brain. And yet it was.
And confronting that inner belief system. Like I've read a talk called The Dual Nature of Man, and the concept there is we're spiritual beings that come and we experience mortality. We experience our childhood, often traumatic. We step into the flesh, and the concepts of like the flesh is weak, We're trying to grow, we're trying to overcome. And this idea of like, okay, there are kind of, let's call it 2 versions of me. One is this really good person that like loves his wife and his children and wants to just help the world. The other version does things that aren't in line with my value system. Sometimes I'm out of control angry, or sometimes whatever the guy's thing is, And so men are tugged, and back and forth. It's like the minute they step into like, I think I'm a good guy, it's like the other part rips them back down as quick as a shame belief, like, who do you think you are, So this is the nature of it. When we get a little bit of courage, this other part of us, hey, wait, be small again, right?
Yeah.
And so, you can hear this concept in so many different books of this dialogue of, the inner workings of us and shame and all this stuff. And going back to that experiential nature, it's like, I want to make this visceral. I want someone to feel like they're in their own head. And there's this tug of war between who they want to be and who they think they are. And so, right, having this mask on and helping men see, like, you've believed this is the version of you. So many men come in and they think they're broken and bad and worthless dad, and they've already cognitively thought through all this stuff. And then we help them take off the mask and we go, this isn't who you are. And so one of the things I've done along those concepts of the mask, and it's cool because guys can hear this and they're like, oh man, that sounds weird. I know the trick. And guess what? You come and feel it.
Oh,
That's different. And this is what's
yeah.
happening. So many people are living vicariously. They're watching other people live, right? On TV or whatever. You come to Rise and you live. You wake up. And so in this cave scenario, right, one of the things I do before then is I have a different type of mask, and I call it the poser mask, right? And it's kind of like, all is well. I got it. Shiny guy. I got it all together. And we say, take off the mask. And what's interesting, because then most guys go, okay, I'll be who I really am, which is this broken, worthless guy. That's also a mask too. And so we have this dialogue.
The mask under the mask.
Yeah. And it's the one that I really think I am. So I create this poser, persona to cover what I don't want other people to see. And this is where I'm amazing. And this is where you get narcissistic type behavior at the extreme end. It's not actually like I'm just a narcissist. It's I feel so broken inside. I want to perfect so people don't see me as this part. And so at Rise, we help people identify this. How do you show up shiny? And it's a good intention, but you don't actually believe it. You believe this stuff.
The demon, the gargoyle mask. Yeah.
Right. So guys take off the poser mask and then they're like, oh, okay, I'll be really who I really am. And it's like, no, that's not who you are either. Take off this false mask. And then if you remember, we have men step into strength and they have an experience with like this king version of themselves. Yeah. And we ask them, what are you fighting for? Right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And going back to the cave, at the end of the experience, so the whole time, there was not a moment in that experience where literally I didn't want to just crawl out of my skin. And then at the very end, this is where the transformation happened for me. The very end, you asked all of us a question. You said, what contracts are you making with darkness? Our lights were off. He said, what contracts are you making with darkness? And we were in complete darkness. Like it was as dark as you can get. And my initial thought was, well, none, that's stupid. Like who makes contracts with darkness? And then you started to elaborate. You said, what contracts are you making with darkness? And we lit our lights and you said, what contracts are you making with anger? What contracts are you making with, and you went down this list and then you got to the one that I had not only made a contract with, I signed it in triplicate. I had it sealed and authorized. Like it was done really, really well. Top lawyers created this contract. And that was with sadness. And the contract I had made was with sadness, which was still part of the darkness. And to put some context around that, going through my divorce, it's incredibly hard, like harder than anything I've ever done.
Right.
And then I started dating this amazing human, just an incredible person that I loved. I absolutely loved her. And we had broken up because we realized it wasn't going to work.
Right.
And for at least over a month, maybe a couple months, I woke up every morning with this crazy pit in my stomach, this nauseating feeling of, oh man, I have to live another day. And this sadness. And it wasn't a complete depression, but it was absolute sadness.
Right.
And I felt like I couldn't shake it. I felt like, I'm never going to be whole again, because there's this loss, there's this hole in my life that I will never be able to fill.
Right.
And when you said it's time to rip up the contract,
Mm-hmm.
and you made this motion with your hand of ripping up the contract and tearing it in half, and I saw myself take my own contract with sadness,
Right.
and shred it, rip it apart. And it was one of the craziest things I've ever experienced, because I literally felt a sensation in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
I almost as if it was like forcibly rewiring
Right.
my brain and the neural pathways inside. And instantly, this is that change we were talking about, that instant change. Right. I went from abject sadness and just feeling despondent to a place of incredible gratitude.
Right.
And instead of this forlorn, I don't want to get out of bed every morning, instead of that, I felt, how lucky was I that I got to spend 6+ months of my life with this amazing human, that I got to explore parts of me that I didn't even know were there, that I got to experience love on an incredible level. And instead of that, oh, woe is me,
right,
that entire experience, kind of like the train, with Stephen Covey, that entire experience flipped in my brain, and there was zero sadness left.
Right.
Because it was flooded with gratitude. And that's all that was left.
Right. That's such an important kind of principle for us to lock in. I have a same mentor, actually. I was in an event with him that he did. It's cool because it was kind of for me. It wasn't the training piece. It was like, come here, experience it. But I remember, so it was me and maybe 50 other therapists, something like that. And he had like this, like almost like we were competing for like who'd been the angriest person in their life, right? He's like, who's been the angriest? Me, right? I always feel raising their hands and sharing their story. And I remember he came to a woman and he said, tell me about your anger. And she's like, I for sure was the angriest. She's like 20 years, just hated everything kind of thing. And she shared the reasons, like abusive childhood and, abused in her marriage, cheated on, these types of things. And he said, because she had said, I was the angriest. And he's like, you were? And she's like, yeah, I'm not angry anymore. And he's like, tell me more, kind of thing, right? So long story short, she says, yeah, I don't feel any anger anymore, ever. Like, I never feel anger. And he's like, wow, how did that come to be? And she tells a little bit, and then he said, this is profound. He said, how long did it take you to go from angry to not angry? And she says, 20 years. And he said, hold on a second. And he did this again. He's like, how long did it take you to go from angry to the day you weren't angry? And she said, it happened in an instant. And he said, tell me what happened. She said, I made a decision that I was done destroying my life with anger. So anger had been happening to her as, let's call it, a victim. And she made a decision. I'm done being a victim. I'm done being angry. All this anger has only isolated me from others. Nobody wants to be around me. My kids don't want to interact with me. I haven't seen my ex-husband or my father for years. Like, no, it's only affecting me. And so she came to consciousness and she shifted. And he said something else really profound. He said, it took you 20 years to be prepared to let go of your anger. He said, when you were ready, you just did it. And he pointed out, we're all capable of that. And so in a really cool way, part of the work I do is I want to speed up that preparing process. And the way we do that is we help people see, is this fear, guilt, shame, anger, apathy, lust, pride, is any of this helping you? And no. Sometimes people get secondary gain from their, let's call them negative emotions.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to process that too. But when people see like the secondary gain I'm getting isn't worth the pain, now we come to consciousness and we start to choose who we want to be. Instead of happiness happening to us or sadness happening to us, we're now living. We're alive and we're making decisions of man, I got a lot to be grateful for today. Yeah, there's hard stuff. I'm not stuffing it, but I'm also not choosing to live from the sadness. I'm choosing to live from gratitude and like aliveness and happiness. And for me, that's where people really start to live. Like, we're all going to have ongoing struggles. It's the nature of mortality life, right?
Yeah.
But when we know to our core, I can interact with this stuff from the way I want to be, right? Then we have better relationships with our loved ones, right?
Yeah.
And so these are the things that have really impacted me in my own journey. And I'm just super grateful that I've been able to do it, with groups of people and in my practice and things like that. And to see marriages heal rapidly it's beautiful, because when me and my wife went to therapy, it was under this like Austin's an addict kind of idea. And I had acted out with pornography. I had lied. I had been deceitful on a neurological level. Like, I don't think my brain was addicted, but I definitely bought that identity. I'm an addict, right? But this at that time we were told it'll take you like 3 to 5 years to heal your marriage. I believed that because I trusted the experts. I was like, okay, yeah. Like I love my wife enough. We're going to labor for 3 to 5 years and then we'll be happy. Like, it's worth that. And it's like, that's just bad therapy. Like, if you can't help someone,
right,
then you're just getting it wrong.
That's
like,
job
I don't know what else to say.
security for the therapist.
Right. And so, I'll tell you, 2 weeks ago, I sat with a couple where he disclosed seeing prostitutes. And but I don't know that there's much more that a woman doesn't want to experience, right? And he had shifted, and she felt that shift. Like, it was a different man in front of her. It wasn't the guy that had done the stuff. And we don't want to excuse that behavior. Like, he came and owned it. And he said, I have work to do to get consistently healthy and rebuild trust and all this. But to then help her have a shift too, where she was able to like know who she was. And it wasn't like, oh, this is fine. It's like, I'm upset and I'm hurt, but I don't have to operate from that, because who's in front of me right now is the man I've been praying for. This is what she said. So the man I've been praying for is here, and he's telling me what this version of him I didn't like was doing. She's like, I have a choice. I can be frustrated at what he's done, or I can be grateful that my husband's finally here again.
Yeah.
And she made a choice, and she's making that choice each day. And I'm not going to pretend it's all, but when I talk to them, it's like, we're having really good times. This has been a beautiful friendship we have. And it's like, do we want to struggle for the next 20 years and punish each other? Or do we just want to go, we've been unhappy and not been our best selves? Let's change that, and let's love each other, and let's be happy, and let's strengthen each other through our relationship. And it's beautiful to see that, where people choose a higher level of connection, a higher level of life. You know what I'm saying?
And that's it, is that choice.
Right.
I just recently spoke up at the prison, the state penitentiary, and that was one of the key principles was, you are not your emotions. Mm-hmm. You are not your thoughts.
Right.
And when I was signing that contract with sadness, mm-hmm. I felt like it was very real to me. Right. I felt like I was my thoughts. Mm-hmm. I was my emotions. But then you said, it's time to rip with that contract. Or in other words, choose. Mm-hmm. Make a proactive choice of how I'm going to live and what emotions mm-hmm. I'm going to choose.
Right. Yeah, in the therapy world, you hear stuff of like, faulty core beliefs or core emotions, or right. And when we take the kind of the power back and we say, I made a decision to believe this about myself, mm-hmm. it strips the victim thing from us of this is happening to me. So John Eldridge, I reference him often. He's a great mentor to millions and millions of people. But in his book, he has this concept of, he says, agreements you've made with your adversary. And he says, no matter what you've done, right? He said, would a loving God come and be like, you're worthless and I don't care about you and you're broke and all the shame messages, right? Yeah. He said, no, a loving God would extend his hand and say, you've done some things that aren't bringing you joy. Come with me and let's do something better, right? And he says, we make this agreement with an enemy. He's like, you call it Satan if you want, call it your mind, whatever. He's like, You've agreed with something that doesn't support you, this belief with sadness. I have to be sad, or life is always sad, whatever, right? And when we can go, I agreed with this belief and I believe it. I believe it. And you make a new decision for a new belief. And you go, I choose to believe life can be really amazing today. Now I'm operating from that belief. And so working through that old belief, right? We call it releasing or relinquishing that negative belief system on a visceral level. This is why so much of therapy doesn't work. We do it cognitively. You can read all sorts of books, podcasts, things that help you understand the science. Good example of this is I have people come in that have read way more books than me on trauma, way more. And I say, understanding trauma, neurologically, chemically, whatever, it doesn't heal trauma. We've learned the technique of healing trauma, not how trauma happens. Those are two totally different things, right? And so being able to come to this place where someone looks into their past and they see a situation happened, this is the nature of like trauma, is there's always a belief that comes from it. It's typically about self.
Yeah.
So I was abused by my dad because he's an alcoholic. I can cognitively understand that as a 35-year-old, but that 8-year-old, he could only go, Dad hits me because I'm bad.
Yeah.
And I believe that. And if you just rewind a little bit before then, you can do two things. Okay, before you had the abuse that stemmed the belief, what did you believe then?
Yeah.
I was happy and I believed I was good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's this piece where you go, and where did you make a decision to believe that message? Whether it was an overt parent, like shaming or whatever, or you adopted it based on the experience. And when people go, I did make a decision to believe this, and you're like, yeah, I don't have to believe this anymore. It's like, no, you don't have to tear up that contract, that agreement, and make a new decision. But you have to lock it in viscerally, where you feel it from head to toe, like,
You feel the neurons rewiring
right,
in the brain.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the nature of that paradigm shift. And so, I love the work you're doing with counterfeit emotions, because in my mind, right, there are these versions of emotional states that people get locked in that aren't like,
Not authentic.
They're not authentic and they're not helpful, right? Sometimes I look at emotions, like people talk about good and bad, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, they're not good or bad. They might feel good or bad. They're just messages. And so often people adopt a message instead of being like, oh, I can reject that. It's like, yeah, like shame and guilt, obviously there's some, one can support you to change. The
Takes
one
you where you want to
can
go.
take you to repeat it, to numb it. And so I love what you said earlier. Like, if we can come to a place where we believe I'm not my emotions, I'm not my beliefs, I'm not even my body, like call it your spirit, call it your soul, call it, whatever you want to call it. Like, if you can come to a place where you go, I'm not these things, I'm experiencing them, and I don't have to live from them, right? So when we have that ability, two things. I remember learning mindfulness, and it was like, learn to be mindful so you don't react to your anger, for example. And I was getting pretty good at that. I was like, okay, I'm feeling angry all the time, but like, I'm not reacting. And I remember coming out of this like mindfulness thing, I was like, I'm tired of feeling like freaking garbage. Like, yeah, I'm managing it. I'm like, I just want to feel good for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
And so coming to this place where it was like, is there a way where I just don't have to feel this anymore? And through my journey, like I can get hit with waves of emotion, but they don't last very long, because I have tools that go, I can shift perspectives and I can get to gratitude, or I can get to happiness. And so I learned to come to this place where I can go internally and not just get mindful with feeling garbage. I can shift into peace or power. Now I'm feeling how I want to feel and acting how I want to act. And whatever happened to me in the wave of emotion that came, it's not in charge. I learned from it, right? If we can see those emotions as either learning, and sometimes the learning is, this isn't who I am, and I'm not actually learning from it. I'm just tapping into knowledge of, that doesn't work with me anymore. That temptation or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Being able to transcend, to say, I am not my emotions.
Right.
I am not my thoughts.
Mhm.
I experience those things,
Mhm.
but they're not who I am. They're
Right.
not my character.
Right.
My character is something higher. It's
Mhm.
not my body. It's not my thoughts. It's not my mind. It's not my accomplishments. It's not even my emotions.
Right.
That I am something more than all of that.
Right.
When we can just step back and I call it witnessing.
Mm.
When we can
Mhm.
just witness
Right.
the messages that are coming in, then all of a sudden we don't have to turn the messenger into a dictator.
Mhm. Right.
And that's where people get stuck, is they think that I feel this, therefore I am this, or therefore I have to act on this. Instead, we can just say, I feel this, and I'm going to watch myself
Right.
feel this.
Mhm.
Just like a cloud in the sky.
Right.
I'm going to watch it come into view
Let
and
it
watch it
pass.
float by
Uh-huh.
and be done.
Right.
And then, in most emotions, they only take 90 seconds.
Mhm.
There's a phenomenal study that shows that most emotions come and go within 90 seconds. It's whether or not we make the choice.
Right. Give it attention. Right.
That it turns from an emotion into a mood.
Mhm.
Whether it turns from, I feel sad that I had this loss, into now I have to be, abject sadness for the next 2 months.
Right.
That's a choice.
Mhm. Right.
And we get to make that choice.
Right. That's something I was watching something by Joe Dispenza the other day, and he said, like, if we live in these, emotional states for a long time, he says, then it becomes a personality. Like, you're just living from that. We all know people that are living in all sorts of, shame, sadness, anger, and none of that's conscious. They've basically trained themselves to feel that way again and again. And they do a ton of research in Joe Dispenza's world. And he says you have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And he says 90% of them are the same types of thoughts you had yesterday. And so if you have these negative messages and beliefs and perspectives, you're just going to lump it on. So how often, do you interact with people, and, one of the first things you learn about them is something that happened to them 20 years ago. That 20-year ago event has defined the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And all this stuff has transpired because of that state of being that now is full evidence that their belief is true. And so often, if we can just help people have a paradigm shift where it's like, well, let's pretend this didn't happen, then all this didn't happen either. And this is just stuff that's in your way in the form of a belief system and a feeling. And then people come to, like, I call it, they come alive. Like, I see people awaken and they're like, oh, I found myself again. Right. And I love, there's this little verse in the line in like the parable of the prodigal son, right? And the line is, and he came unto himself, right? It's like he awakened to who he was. He'd been off track and he wanted to come back. And I think that's what I see in the work I do, is it's like we just help people, like, kind of remember who they really are. Yeah. I tend to look at that from a spiritual state, right? And a belief of our limitless potential. And so one of the things I see that happens is people can be like, oh, I am, I'm a king, or I'm amazing, or whatever. And it's like, yes, but there's a path of growth. And for some people, I believe they need to make amends. They need to apologize. They need to repent, however you want to look at that. Yeah. And so when we're really in a healthy place, we're able to say, I did misstep out of my bounds, and I did help others. And this version of me can say sorry, can do the work to help a relationship heal or whatever. And I have the potential to have a really amazing relationship. I have the potential to build a business or to coach a little league game or whatever, right? Like, when we tap into our potential, and then we act from choice. But so many people are reacting. In that book, Letting Go, I don't know how all the research of this works, but David Hawkins says 96% of the human population never rises above pride. So he says underneath pride is, you have lust, anger, fear, apathy, regret, shame, all these things. And he says most people live in these. And he's like, the place where it shifts is courage. And he says most of the human population does not shift into a place of living from courage. And he says above courage is acceptance, and above that is peace, where we kind of started out today. And so for us, learning I would say, learning to live from peace, right? And we both face really hard things. And coming back to like, oh, this kind of isn't my favorite, but I'm at peace. I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. And that's where hope is born.
Yeah.
So yeah, today's not fantastic, but now I can live in hope, and I can create something better in the future, or I can create something right now. You know, if you and your wife fought yesterday and it blew up and whatever, rejected and said things you didn't mean to say, you can get stuck in that emotional state, or you can go, what if I just apologize and I express love and I create a corrective emotional experience between us where I apologize, maybe she apologizes, I love you too, and we shift into a new connected state.
Yeah.
When people learn to do that, now your relationship isn't happening to you. Like you're choosing it, which is beautiful. So
Yeah. And it's happening for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And hope is one of the most powerful and transcendent emotions we can feel.
Right.
Hope moves people.
Mm-hmm.
It motivates. Hope creates a space
Right.
with a bright future, something to look forward to every day. It's so powerful.
Right.
Understanding the true nature of hope, that by itself can transform someone.
Yeah. I mean, I look at like your journey and even you doing this podcast, like so many people are hopeless, right? They've been to places you and I have been, and they're stuck in hopelessness. And when you get into hopelessness, that's typically honestly where suicidal stuff starts to come from. Like when you think this is how it's always going to be, then you lose that will to live. But when there's a small belief that maybe someone, sees a clip and they're like, oh, someone's been through something I've been through, and they are happy now. They're in a great relationship, right? Now it opens the door to a belief of like, maybe that's can happen for me. And so, I think both of us, the work we try to do is like, be real with like, I've been to hell. Like I couldn't concoct, right? I couldn't make up a worse hell than the things I've experienced. And for some, let's say I shared my story and they're like, man, I've had way worse, whatever. For me, that was a version that I would never want to experience. And so we tend to judge each other's pain, right?
Yeah.
And it's like most of us have been to the depths of darkness that we don't want to experience. And to have come out the other side of that and go, yeah, I went through that and it didn't keep me down, right? Like that's its own paradigm shift. I do this with guys quite often now where I'm like, why don't you look at all the stuff you've done, the things you've experienced, let's call it from the dark side, whatever. You experienced all the lusts of the flesh, you experienced all this, and you still are fighting to be your best self. You're still fighting to be a good husband, a good father. And so you've experienced all these things and they didn't keep you down.
Yeah.
What does that say about you? And when they answer that question, they go, well, maybe I'm better than I thought, or maybe I am. It's like, right. Like if you've experienced all this stuff and you're still striving to like be a good, helpful person, a loving person, that says more about you than all the other stuff you did when you were unconscious or right.
Yeah.
And so that's something I love about you is, I know you go through hard things, but you choose a happiness, you choose a realness, you choose to help others. And I think the way that, the world helps the world heal is we collectively say, this is hard, but I'm here for you and I'll share everything of me to help you. And then you do the same, right? That's how we help each other. And so
it continues to grow. The goodness continues to grow.
Right. So that hope, right? Like I think of faith, hope, charity often. And this hope that there's something more leads us to action to create it. And so I love this idea of like, you can create the life, the marriage, the interactions you want to experience. Not a lot's going to happen to you without you engaging in it intentionally. That's what you want it to be. It has to be chosen. So
yeah. And I remember you saying something, and it struck me so profoundly. You said, I'm not scared of hell. I've already been there. And when you said that, it was so powerful because I knew what you were talking about.
Right.
I wanted that mountain to fall on top of me.
Mm-hmm.
The pain was so extreme. And then you followed it up with, and I made it out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that hope that like, yeah,
mm-hmm.
it hurts bad.
Right.
And I can make it out.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to have that fear
right.
of that anymore because I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it feels like. And there is a place where we can get out of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a guy that came to our last event who has a really, really profound background story of heroin addiction, and he had like a near-death experience and some pretty profound things in that, like why he was flatlined, right? Like you hear. And in that, one of the paradigm shifts he had is he had an experience where he was homeless, and he remembers being in a garbage, like a trash can, getting a piece of pizza off of the bottom of a dumpster, dirty, right? Ugh. And the story he shares is like, I decided I was going to kill myself, is what he shared. And he said, this isn't living. And so he had that experience, but when he was in his near-death experience, he saw that experience. And he saw, this is how he describes it, he saw like loved ones from whatever the other side wrapping their arms around him, and like he felt peace, and he made a decision not to kill himself. In his waking real life, before the near-death experience, he didn't know what happened to him, right? He didn't know. He just knew he was miserable. And he was shown, and let's say it was from God. Maybe it was his mind healing itself. Like however you look at it, he had a paradigm shift. And for him, he said, I went to the other, I was dead. I was flatlined. My heart wasn't beating. And I had this spiritual experience where I was shown that there are like ancestors on the other side that are with us. And he's like, that was a real shifting moment for me to know that I was loved. And before that, I didn't know I was lovable. And so these experiences people have with spirituality, like kind of going back to this being in hell, like for me, in the deepest, darkest places, like for me, I felt God, I felt Christ come and kind of extend this hand, right? And knowing that like that hand is extended all the day long. Sometimes we're too blind to see it, to feel it, and to let that in. I know so many good people that don't feel worthy of God's love. Yeah. And it's there, it's available, but their belief doesn't allow it in. They believe God can't love a sinner or whatever. And for me, it's like you look at who Christ was. He came to those that were beaten down and broken, and I think that's what all of us, right? If you're in a good place, like extend that hand, right? And I love the work you're doing, because you know so many people are in pain, losing to their emotions and their belief systems, and sending this message of hope. Like it doesn't have to stay this way. Like it can shift rapidly is important. So
yeah, we often think that I can fall farther than Christ can reach, and that's not true.
Right.
We cannot fall farther than Christ can reach.
Right.
That hand is always outstretched, and all we have to do is simply reach out.
Right. And that's, so many people are blind to that extended hand because they're just seeing the darkness in front of them.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we try to do at Rise. It's like, let's pierce that belief system, that darkness. And always, 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 like, if you think of like the dark clouds come in, if you remove the dark clouds, the sunlight's always there. It's the same thing with like when we remove these emotions, shame or guilt or, fear. Fear is a huge thing for people.
Yeah.
We live in fear so often. And when we can pierce through that fear and see like right there is hope, right there is love, right there is peace.
It's right there.
And then what's most powerful is when people learn to do it consciously. Yeah. So I have this thing, I know you know this, I call it communing with my creator. I start my day with this, like I want to interact with deity. And then I use this language of hunting down my higher self. So you can wake up and you've been unconscious, you've been asleep, and you're in a weird state of being, you're whatever, feel depressed or anxious or whatever. This idea of me going, I'm going to find really pretty rapidly now this higher version of me, and I'm going to step into that. And it's like, I woke up with this. I'm going to choose to know who I really am and what I'm going to do today. That's where I believe people start to really live in power and they create the lives they want. And that's, I think, what you want to inspire is, right? Like,
so powerful.
There's something better, my friends, right? It is. So, like, this idea of like taking off the mask, like, again, you can watch this on TV, you can hear this, but to like go through an experience. So again, like Rise is an experience. It's not a training. It's not a retreat. It's like you're coming into an experience. You're going into the wilderness, and you might hypothetically think you're going to come put masks on. I may or may not do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful. And where can people learn about Rise and learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so we have a podcast where we talk quite a bit about some of our work called One by One, 1x1. And then if you go to destinedtorise.org, that's where you can sign up for Rise. We have some pretty cool things coming up. We're about to set a date for we want it to be a 100-man Rise. We've only ever done about 15, and so we want to extend it to more men, make it much more financially available to people. And so we have those coming up. I think that one's going to be in September. We have one coming up in July. It's cool. We have this guy lets us use his mansion in Tokerville for free, which is pretty rad.
That's awesome.
He loves it. And so we have this really cool place there where we can just get work done. So yeah, destinedtorise.org. You'll find the dates and you sign up, have a chat with me. And what's been really beautiful is we've been able to have people that want to help others that donate. And so we have scholarships and things where people can come, because I don't think it should cost a crazy ton to heal through the Lord, right? Like that's not ours to charge, but there's expenses with that. So yeah, one thing I would say, whether you come to Arise or you listen to Curtis, like I would encourage people like to learn to go inwards and upwards is what I call it, where so much of the external life is what's affecting you. And when you get to know yourself, when you get to have a relationship with God, and then you engage the world, like that space with the Lord is so much more valuable than a time with me or, like another therapist or whatever. And that's really where Rise has gone the last couple of years is I want to create spaces where people can contemplate God and they can feel his love. This idea of, I remember this quote by Russell Nelson, and it says, it's imperative, right? Like required, it's imperative that we experience the love of the Father and the Son. And so Rise, we've tried to create like a sanctuary type space where you can come and feel seen, feel loved. And it's cool because I think you came a couple years ago to another one. It's kind of like a hybrid version. But we have a good friend, Yella, all right?
I love Yella.
Yella, he did an event. I love this. He did his own event, and I was invited, and he played The Last Samurai at that event. And it shifted Rise for me because it shows this guy, I don't want to go too deep into the story, but in essence, he is like withdrawing from alcoholism. He's facing all his demons, and he's in like this sanctuary-esque space, and he just needs to be nurtured. Like he's been hurting and he's been hurting others. And so he's in this like sanctuary space, this healing space. And then as he gets healthy, now they train him. It's like a dojo type scenario, right? Where they're training him to be a samurai. And so Rise is meant to be this place where at first we bind up your wounds. We see you and we help you heal. We help nurture that healing process. And as a man pretty rapidly feels whole again, then we go, now we need to train you to be the man you want to be. We got to impart to you some skills to go home with, and we need you to do them here. We don't want to talk about them here. We need you to have these so when you go home and you interact with your wife, it's a part of you. So that let's call it rapid healing and rapid learning. It happens in these paradigm shifting ways. There's obviously more that plays into it, but it's beautiful because each man that comes, I don't actually feel anymore that I'm doing a whole lot. I really believe like the Lord is one by one reaching to each man. So we named our podcast One by One is we facilitate an experience. We create a scenario where people can feel the Lord love them. And I would even suggest for those that don't believe in Christ, come have an experience,
Yeah.
and you'll feel the love of goodness, and you'll see who you really are, which is pretty magical. So
Yeah, it is. Austin, I'm so grateful that you would come share your insights and your experiences and the amazing amount of training and knowledge that you have, but also just your heart.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks for sharing your heart with us. And the final question, short question, is there's only one emotion that has no counterfeit, and that's peace. Where do you find peace?
I've learned to find peace in the Prince of Peace, which is Jesus Christ, having a relationship with Christ, allowing myself to not feel like that love is conditional. I have a deep testimony that Christ loves us. That's why he suffered for our sins and died for us. That's not because he dislikes us or thinks we're bad, or like he loves us. That's why he extends that hand of mercy. So I find peace through Christ, and then that transcends into everything. The world, I often say, like, the storm is swirling around, and I feel at peace in this lighthouse space, right? And that's through Christ. I find my peace there, and then I can create peace with my interactions with my wife. I can create peace in my home with my children. I can help create peace in marriages. Like, that's what the Lord has helped me learn to do. I've learned to help people feel peace in their hearts, in their heads, right? In their sexuality. But it's always through Jesus Christ and his mercy, his atonement. That's where I found peace. And the beautiful thing is it's literally always available.
It is. It is. Thanks, Austin.
You're welcome.
I love you.
Thanks for having me. Love you too. You're the best. This is awesome.